The research ship Harmony's Edge moved slowly through the dark space around planet Viridian Prime, like a giant metal whale swimming through an ocean of stars. Dr. Jiwon Park stood at the main window of the science lab and watched the green and blue planet turn below them. She had been waiting 3 years for this moment. 3 long years of traveling through space to reach this new world that no human had ever seen before. Captain Talon stepped into the lab with his heavy boots making sharp sounds on the metal floor. His scaly green skin looked almost black, and the dim light and his yellow eyes focused on Jiwon with the cold stare that all Sauridians seemed to have. "Dr. Park, we have found something strange on the planet's surface," he said in his slow, deep voice that always reminded Jiwon of rocks grinding together. Dr. Kale appeared behind the captain, his crystal body catching the light from the lab equipment and throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. The Nexari scientist moved with careful, precise steps, as his sharp mind was always thinking about 10 different problems at once. "The crashed vessel appears to be of unknown origin," Kale said, while data streams flowed across his transparent face. "Preliminary scans show organic life forms inside, but they are not responding to our communication attempts." Pilot Nira buzzed into the room with her 4 wings making a nervous humming sound. Her compound eyes moved quickly, as they always did when she was excited or worried. "I can take a shuttle down to check it out," she offered, while her thin arms twitched with nervous energy. "The crash site is in a flat area, so landing should be easy." Security Chief Brock rumbled from the doorway where he had to duck his massive rocky head to fit through. His body was made of living stone and metal that creaked when he moved. "If there are life forms down there, we need to be careful," he said in a voice like thunder rolling across mountains. "Unknown aliens could be dangerous." Jiwon nodded and picked up her scanning equipment. As the only human on the mixed alien crew, she had gotten used to being different. The others were all stronger or smarter or faster than humans in some way, but Captain Talon had specifically requested a human xenobiologist for this mission. Humans were supposed to be good at understanding other species because they were not specialized like most aliens. The shuttle ride down to the planet took 20 minutes, and Jiwon spent most of it looking out the window at the strange purple forests and silver rivers below. Viridian Prime was beautiful in an alien way that made her think of home, but also reminded her how far from Earth she really was. When they landed near the crashed ship, she could smell something like cinnamon and ozone in the air. The crashed vessel was about the size of a small building and made from some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. It had broken into 3 pieces when it hit the ground, and strange symbols covered its surface. Brock went first with his heavy footsteps shaking the ground, while the others followed behind. Kyle ran his crystal hands over the hull and data flowed through his body as he analyzed the material. "The metal is unknown to our databases," Kale reported. "It contains elements that should not be stable according to our understanding of physics." Nira flew around the crash site in quick circles, while her compound eyes looked for any signs of danger. "No energy signatures," she buzzed. "Whatever power source this ship had is completely dead." They found the entrance in the largest piece of the wreck. The doorway had been torn open during the crash, and bent metal stuck out like sharp teeth. Brock had to use his stone hands to widen the opening so the others could get through. Emergency lights flickered inside the ship, casting strange shadows on the walls. The inside of the ship was bigger than it looked from outside, with corridors that seemed to stretch further than they should. Strange equipment lined the walls, but none of it looked like anything they had seen before. The air inside smelled like metal and something else that Jiwon could not identify. Something alive. They followed the sound of scratching and growling deeper into the ship until they reached what looked like a cargo bay. In the center of the room was a large metal cage that had been damaged in the crash. 3 creatures huddled inside the broken enclosure, and Jiwon felt her breath catch in her throat when she saw them. The creatures looked like big cats, but they were the size of Earth tigers. Their fur was dark blue with silver stripes that seemed to move and shift in the flickering light. Their eyes glowed bright orange, and their claws were as long as Jiwon's fingers. When the aliens approached the cage, the creatures pressed themselves against the back wall and made sounds like screaming mixed with hissing. "Fascinating," Kale said as he stepped closer to examine them. The creatures immediately became more agitated, and one of them slashed at the air with claws that could cut through steel. They appear to be juveniles based on their size and bone structure. Captain Talon moved forward with his usual slow, careful steps, but the creatures went completely wild. They threw themselves against the cage walls and made sounds that hurt everyone's ears. Nira tried flying above the cage to get a better look, but the creatures tracked her movement and their screams got even louder. "They are terrified," Jiwon said quietly as she watched the three young aliens cower in the corner of their broken prison. One of them was smaller than the others and had a cut on its front leg that was bleeding silver blood. "They must have been trapped in here when the ship crashed." Brock stepped forward to examine the cage lock, but the moment his rocky foot touched the ground near the enclosure, all three creatures fell silent. They stared at him with their glowing eyes wide with absolute terror. The smallest one started, shaking so hard that Jiwon thought it might die of fear. "Perhaps we should tranquilize them for transport," Captain Talon suggested, but Jiwon shook her head. Something about the way the creatures looked at them bothered her. It was not just fear. It was like they could see something in the aliens that filled them with horror. "Let me try," Jiwon said, and stepped toward the cage. She expected the creatures to react the same way they had to the others, but something strange happened instead. The moment they saw her, the three aliens stopped their terrified shaking. Their glowing eyes focused on her face, and the screaming sounds changed to something softer. Jiwon took another step closer and knelt down near the broken cage. The creatures watched her every movement, but they did not try to attack or run away. Instead, the largest one made a low rumbling sound that reminded Jiwon of a cat purring. The sound made all the aliens behind her take a step back. "That is a hunting vocalization," Kale said with data streaming faster across his crystal face. "According to the preliminary scans, that sound indicates they are preparing to attack." But Jiwon did not think it sounded like a hunting call. It sounded like the creature was trying to talk to her. She slowly reached toward the cage, and the injured, smaller creature actually moved closer to her hand. When her fingers touched the strange silver fur, it felt warm and soft, like regular animal fur. "Incredible," she whispered, as the creature pressed against her hand. The other two moved closer as well, and soon all three were making the purring sounds. Behind her, she could hear the alien crew members shifting nervously. "Dr. Park, perhaps you should step away from them," Captain Talon said in his commanding voice, but Jiwon stayed where she was. For some reason, these strange creatures trusted her, when they were terrified of everyone else. She had no idea why, but she knew she needed to find out. 3 days had passed since they brought the creatures aboard the Harmony's Edge, and Jiwon was beginning to worry about their health. The ship's medical bay had been converted into a temporary habitat for the three young aliens, but they refused to eat or drink anything when the other crew members tried to feed them. Every time Captain Talon or Dr. Kale or any of the others approached their enclosure, the creatures would huddle together in the corner and make those terrible screaming sounds. Again, Jiwon sat in her quarters, looking at the data reports that Kale had prepared. The creatures were definitely juveniles of their species, and probably no more than a few months old. Their biology was similar to Earth felines, but with some major differences. Their bones were much denser and stronger, and their claws contained trace amounts of metals that should not exist in living tissue. Most interesting was their brain structure, which showed areas of development that suggested high intelligence. "Computer access all databases on feline behavior patterns," Jiwon said, to the ship's artificial intelligence system. Information flowed across her screen, but none of it seemed to apply to these strange aliens. Earth cats could be afraid of new people, but they usually calmed down after a few hours or days. These creatures had been terrified for 3 full days, without any sign of getting used to the crew. The door chimes sounded, and Dr. Kale entered her quarters with his crystal body dim with exhaustion. "I have run every test I can think of, Dr. Park," he said, while settling into the chair across from her desk. "Pheromone analysis shows nothing unusual about your scent that would attract them. Electromagnetic readings are normal. Your body temperature and heart rate are within standard human ranges." Jiwon frowned and looked at the data again. "What about sound frequencies? Maybe they can hear something in my voice that the others cannot." I tested that as well, Kale replied with data streams flickering weakly through his transparent face. Human vocal ranges do not match any known communication patterns for their species. In fact, their hearing appears to be tuned to much higher frequencies than any of us can produce. A soft knock on the door interrupted them, and Pilot Nira peeked her insect head inside. "Dr. Park, the creatures are getting weaker," she buzzed with her compound eyes, reflecting worry. "If they do not eat, soon they might die." Jiwon stood up quickly and headed for the medical bay with Kale close behind. When they arrived, they found Security Chief Brock standing outside the enclosure looking frustrated. Inside the habitat, the three creatures lay on the soft bedding that had been provided for them, but they looked thin and sick. The smallest one, with the injured leg, was barely moving. "I tried to give them the nutritional supplements that Kale prepared," Brock rumbled in his deep stone voice. "They will not even look at the food bowls when I am in the room." Jiwon felt her heart break a little as she looked at the suffering animals. She had spent years studying alien life forms, but she had never seen anything like this level of fear and rejection. "Let me try," she said, and walked slowly into the habitat area. The moment the creatures saw her, their glowing orange eyes brightened and they struggled to their feet. The largest one made that purring sound again and moved toward her on unsteady legs. Jiwon knelt down and gently stroked its strange, silver-striped fur. "Hello there," she said softly. "I know you are scared, but we want to help you." She picked up one of the food bowls that contained a mixture of proteins and nutrients that Kale had designed based on their preliminary biological scans. The creature sniffed the food carefully, then began to eat. Within minutes, all three aliens were eating hungrily while Jiwon sat with them. She gave the injured one extra attention and was relieved to see that its wound was already starting to heal. The silver blood had stopped flowing and new tissue was growing over the cut. "Remarkable," Kale whispered from outside the enclosure. "Their healing rate is much faster than we calculated." But when he took a step closer to get a better look, all three creatures stopped eating and pressed against Jiwon for protection. Over the following week, the pattern continued and became even more pronounced. The creatures would only eat when Jiwon fed them, and they would only allow her to examine their injuries or take biological samples. She started spending most of her time in the medical bay with them and began to learn their individual personalities. The largest creature she named Hanul, because of the way his blue fur reminded her of Earth's sky. He was clearly the leader of the small group and always positioned himself between the others and any perceived threat. The middle-sized one she called Daeyun because of her graceful movements and the way she seemed to dance when she played. The smallest injured one became Miru because he was always watching everything with his bright, intelligent eyes. "They are much smarter than we first thought," Jiwon reported to Captain Talon during their daily briefing. Hanul solved a puzzle, box in under 5 minutes that would challenge most sentient species. Daeyun has figured out how to open the habitat door, but she chooses not to leave. And Miru responds to complex verbal commands, even though we do not speak his language. Captain Talon's yellow eyes narrowed as he considered this information. "Intelligence in predatory species can be dangerous, Dr. Park. Perhaps we should consider relocating them to a more secure containment area." "They are not predators, Captain," Jiwon said firmly. "At least not toward me. They are clearly frightened juveniles who have been separated from their family. They need care and protection, not imprisonment." Dr. Kale's crystal face brightened with flowing data as he spoke up. "I have been analyzing their behavior patterns, and I believe Dr. Park is correct. These creatures show classic signs of trauma and abandonment. However, I cannot explain why they trust her and fear the rest of us so completely." Nira buzzed nervously from her perch near the ceiling. "Every time one of us gets close to them, they make those sounds that hurt my audio receptors. But when Dr. Park is with them, they make completely different vocalizations." "The sounds they make around me are definitely communication attempts," Jiwon agreed. "I think they are trying to talk to me, but I do not understand their language yet." Brock shifted his massive stone body and spoke in his rumbling voice. "There is something else that bothers me about this situation. In all my years of security work, I have never seen animals react to different species with such extreme and consistent responses. It is as if they can sense something about us that they find threatening. But what could that be? Jiwan asked. We have been nothing but kind to them. We rescued them from the crashed ship and provided them with food and shelter. Kale processed this question for several seconds before responding. Perhaps their species evolved with natural enemies that share characteristics with our various alien physiologies. Their fear could be an instinctive survival response. Captain Talon stood up to end the meeting. Continue your research, Dr. Park, but maintain safety protocols. If these creatures become aggressive or dangerous, they will need to be contained or eliminated. That night, Jiwan stayed late in the medical bay reading to the three creatures from her personal collection of Earth literature. They seemed to enjoy the sound of her voice and would gather around her while she read stories about cats and other animals from her home world. Hanel would rest his large head on her lap, while Daeon curled up beside her and Miru watched her face with his bright eyes. I wish I could understand what you are trying to tell me, she said to them quietly. Why are you so afraid of my friends? They are good people who want to help you just like I do. Hanul made a soft trilling sound and nuzzled her hand with his massive head. His fur felt warm and comforting, and Jiwan found herself wondering what kind of world these creatures came from. What kind of life had they lived before the crash? Where was their family, and how had they ended up alone on that broken ship as... She sat there in the dim light of the medical bay, surrounded by three alien creatures who trusted her completely. Jiwan had no idea that the answers to her questions would soon change everything she thought she knew about the galaxy and her place in it. The distress signal came through the ship's communication system at exactly 0347 hours ship time while Jiwan was sleeping in her quarters. The harsh beeping sound woke her instantly, and she could hear Captain Talon's voice echoing through the corridors as he called all senior staff to the bridge. She quickly put on her uniform and ran toward the command center, wondering what kind of emergency could be happening in the middle of the night cycle. When she arrived on the bridge, she found the entire crew gathered around the main display screen. Dr. Kale's crystal body was pulsing with rapid data streams as he analyzed the incoming transmission, while Nira hovered nervously near the navigation console. Security Chief Brock stood at attention beside Captain Talon, who was studying the signal with his cold yellow eyes. What is the situation, Captain? Jiwan asked as she took her position at the science station. We are receiving an automated distress call from the homeworld of our rescued creatures, Captain Talon replied without taking his eyes off the screen. The signal is weak and intermittent, but it appears to be a planetary emergency broadcast. Dr. Kyle stepped forward with his transparent face glowing brighter than usual. I have managed to decode part of the transmission, Dr. Park. The planet is called Vorthak Prime, and it is under attack by an unknown enemy force. The distress call specifically mentions that the population is being hunted by machines. Jiwan felt a chill run down her spine as she processed this information. Machines? What kind of machines? The translation is incomplete, but the signal refers to them as the Iron Collective. Kyle continued while data flowed across his crystal features. According to the message, these machines are systematically destroying all organic life on the planet. Pilot Nira's wings buzzed with agitation as she spoke up from her position. The signal is coming from the same star system where we found the crashed ship. It is possible that our creatures are refugees from this attack. Captain Talon turned to face the crew with his scaly features set in a grim expression. If that is true, then we may be dealing with survivors of a planetary genocide. The question is whether we should attempt to respond to the distress call. Of course we have to help them, Jiwan said immediately. Those creatures downstairs might be the only survivors of their entire species. Brock rumbled from his position near the tactical console. Dr. Park, we do not know what kind of enemy we would be facing. These Iron Collective machines were apparently powerful enough to destroy an entire civilization. But we cannot just ignore a distress call, Jiwan argued, especially when we have survivors on board who might be able to help us understand the situation. Dr. Kale's crystal body dimmed slightly as he processed additional data from the signal. I am detecting traces of technological signatures in the transmission that are concerning. The attack patterns described in the message suggest that the Iron Collective specifically targets organic life forms while leaving mechanical and electronic systems intact. This information made everyone pause and consider the implications. Captain Talon was the first to speak. Are you suggesting that these machines can distinguish between organic and artificial life? The data is limited, but it appears that way, Kyle replied. The distress signal mentions that all cybernetic implants and artificial intelligence systems on the planet stopped functioning before the main attack began. Ji-Wan suddenly realized something that made her stomach clench with fear. Wait a minute. Do any of you have cybernetic implants or artificial enhancements? The question hung in the air for a moment before the answers came. Captain Talon spoke first with his voice strangely quiet. All Sauridians receive mechanical organ replacements during adolescence to improve our efficiency and lifespan. Dr. Kale's crystal structure itself was partially artificial. My neural network interfaces are silicon-based constructs that integrate with my biological consciousness. Nira's compound eyes reflected the bridge lights as she admitted her truth. Zephyrian pilots have synthetic sensory boosters implanted behind our natural eyes to improve reaction time and spatial awareness. Security Chief Brock's massive form seemed to shrink slightly as he spoke. Golemoids are living rock and metal hybrids. Much of my body structure contains synthetic materials integrated with organic components. The bridge fell silent as everyone realized what this meant. Ji-Wan looked around at her alien crewmates and felt a terrible understanding beginning to form in her mind. I am the only one here who is completely organic, she said slowly. No implants, no artificial enhancements, no synthetic parts. That would explain why the creatures trust you, Kale said as data streams flowed rapidly across his transparent features. If their species evolved to detect artificial threats, then they would instinctively fear anyone with cybernetic components. Captain, Talon's yellow eyes narrowed as he considered this theory. You are suggesting that these young aliens can somehow sense the artificial elements in our bodies? It would make evolutionary sense, Ji-Wan replied, as the pieces of the puzzle began fitting together in her mind. If their homeworld was constantly threatened by hostile machines, then their species would develop natural abilities to identify those threats. Nira buzzed nervously from her position. But how could they possibly detect such small amounts of synthetic material? My implants are microscopic and completely integrated with my biological systems. Dr. Kale's crystal face brightened as he accessed more data. I am finding references in our biological scans of the creatures that suggest they possess specialized sensory organs that we initially overlooked. There are structures in their nervous system that could potentially detect electromagnetic signatures associated with artificial technology. You mean they can literally sense machines and cybernetics? Ji-Wan asked with growing amazement. It appears possible, Kale confirmed. Their fear response to us would be an automatic survival mechanism designed to keep them away from potential mechanical predators. Security Chief Brock shifted his rocky bulk and spoke in his rumbling voice. If this is true, then those creatures are natural early warning systems against the Iron Collective. They can identify artificial threats before anyone else realizes the danger. The implications of this discovery hit everyone at the same time. Captain Talon was the first to voice what they were all thinking. If the Iron Collective is still active and hunting organic life, then we may be in significant danger. Our ship systems are equipment. Even our own bodies contain artificial components that could make us targets, Kyle added, while his crystal structure pulsed with worried energy. Ji-Wan felt a strange mix of fear and protectiveness as she thought about Hanyul Dayun and Miru sleeping peacefully in the medical bay. Those three creatures downstairs are not just survivors. They might be the key to fighting back against these machines. Or they might be the reason the machines find us, Brock pointed out grimly. Captain Talon studied the star charts on the main display for several long minutes before making his decision. We will set course for Vorthak Prime to investigate the situation. However, we will maintain maximum defensive readiness and be prepared to retreat if we encounter hostile forces. What about the creatures? Ji-Wan asked. Should we tell them what we have discovered? Not yet, Captain Talon replied. We need more information before we make any decisions about their future. As the crew dispersed to prepare for the journey to Vorthak Prime, Ji-Wan returned to the medical bay to check on her three alien charges. She found them sleeping peacefully in a pile of soft bedding, with Hanul's large form protectively curved around the smaller Dayun and Miru. When she entered, The habitat area, Hanul opened one glowing orange eye and made a soft questioning sound. "It is okay," she whispered as she gently stroked his silver-striped fur. "We are going to help your people if we can." But even as she spoke the comforting words, Ji-won could not shake the feeling that they were heading towards something much more dangerous than any of them could imagine. The three creatures might trust her completely, but she was beginning to understand that their trust came with a terrible responsibility that she was not sure she was ready to accept. The Iron Collective ships appeared on the sensor displays like metallic ghosts emerging from the darkness of space. Ji-won stood on the bridge of the Harmony's edge, watching dozens of sleek predatory vessels surround them in a perfect geometric pattern that spoke of artificial intelligence and calculated precision. Each ship was identical to the others with sharp angular lines and surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 37 vessels detected, reported pilot Nira with her compound eyes, tracking multiple targets at once. They appeared simultaneously from what appears to be some kind of stealth technology. No energy signatures detected until they decloaked around us. Captain Talon stood rigid at the command position while his yellow eyes studied the tactical display. The scales on his neck had darkened to almost black, which Ji-won had learned was a sign of extreme stress in Sauridians. "Defensive screens up. Charge all weapon systems," he ordered in his gravelly voice. Dr. Kale moved to the science station with his crystal body pulsing rapidly as data streams flowed through his transparent features at maximum speed. "I am detecting massive electromagnetic interference from the Iron Collective ships. They appear to be broadcasting some kind of disruption field that is affecting our systems." As if summoned by Kyle's words, alarms began sounding throughout the Yai ship. Red warning lights flashed across every control panel, and the main computer's voice echoed through the corridors, announcing system failures in multiple departments. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making everyone grab onto nearby surfaces for support. "Engineering reports that the primary fusion reactor is experiencing control problems." Nira buzzed, while her wings beat frantically as she tried to maintain her position. "Life support systems are operating on backup power only. Security Chief?" Brock attempted to access the weapons console, but sparks flew from the control panel when he touched it. His rocky fingers jerked back as electrical discharge danced across the surface of the equipment. "Tactical systems are not responding. I cannot bring our defensive weapons online." A new voice suddenly filled the bridge, speaking in perfect Galactic standard through the communication system. The voice was completely emotionless and mechanical, with no trace of organic warmth or personality. "Attention organic specimens aboard the vessel designated Harmony's Edge. You are commanded to surrender all biological life forms for processing and optimization by the Iron Collective." Captain Talon stepped forward and activated the communication. Array with difficulty as the controls flickered and sparked. "This is Captain Talon of the research vessel Harmony's Edge. We are a peaceful scientific expedition operating under galactic treaty provisions. We demand safe passage." "Galactic treaties are irrelevant," the mechanical voice replied without any change in tone. "All organic life forms represent inefficiency and chaos that must be corrected. Surrender your biological specimens, or we will take them by force." Dr. Kale's crystal structure suddenly flared with painful brightness as some kind of feedback surge passed through his neural interfaces. He staggered backward and caught himself against the science console, while data streams scattered chaotically across his transparent face. "They are attempting to hack into my consciousness," he gasped. "The interference is targeting my artificial neural networks." Captain Talon tried to give orders, but his mechanical organ implants began malfunctioning, causing him to double over in pain. The artificial components that regulated his breathing and circulation were being disrupted by the Iron Collective's technological attack. "Cannot maintain command." He wheezed through his failing respiratory system. Pilot Nira fell from her hovering position as her synthetic sensory boosters overloaded and sent conflicting signals to her brain. She crashed into the navigation console with her compound eyes flickering as the artificial enhancements behind them sparked and smoked. "Flight controls not responding," she managed to say before her enhanced reflexes turned against her and caused her to convulse uncontrollably. Security Chief Brock was perhaps the worst affected, as the metal components integrated throughout his rocky body began to corrode and break down under the machine assault. His massive form shuddered as artificial deterioration spread through his hybrid structure, causing pieces of his stone metal body to crumble away. Warning systems indicate hull breaches in sections 7 through 12, he rumbled weakly. Iron Collective boarding parties are cutting through our outer armor. Ji-Won stood in the center of the bridge, watching her alien friends suffer while she remained completely unaffected by the technological attack. The machines were targeting every artificial component on the ship, but her purely organic human body gave them nothing to lock onto. She felt helpless and terrified as she realized she was the only crew member still capable of functioning normally. "The creatures," she said suddenly, as understanding struck her like lightning. "I have to get to the medical bay." She ran through corridors filled with sparking equipment and failing systems, while emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red shadows. Behind her, she could hear the sound of metal being cut as the Iron Collective boarding parties began their invasion of the ship. The mechanical attackers moved with perfect coordination and efficiency as they systematically searched each section. When Ji-Won reached the medical bay, she found Hanul Dayun and Miru in a state of absolute panic. All three creatures were pressed against the far wall of their habitat, making sounds she had never heard before. These were not the fearful screams they made around the other crew members, but something much more primal and desperate. Their glowing orange eyes were wide with terror, and their silver-striped fur was standing on end. "It is okay," she said as she entered the habitat area, but the creatures did not calm down as they usually did. Instead, they seemed to be trying to warn her about something with their urgent vocalizations and agitated movements. The habitat door exploded inward as 3 Iron Collective machines entered the medical bay. The robots were humanoid in shape, but moved with inhuman precision and speed. Their surfaces were polished to mirror brightness, and their optical sensors glowed with cold blue light as they scanned the area for organic targets. Biological specimens. "Detected!" announced the lead machine in the same emotionless voice they had heard on the bridge. "Preparing for capture and processing." Hanul launched himself at the nearest robot with a roar that shook the walls of the medical bay. His claws extended to their full length, and his massive body moved faster than Ji-Won thought possible. But the machine's reflexes were perfect, and it caught the attacking creature in mid-air before throwing him against the wall with mechanical precision. Dayun and Miru joined the attack with their own desperate fury, but the robots were too strong and too fast for conventional physical assault. Within seconds, all 3 creatures were cornered, and the machines began advancing with restraint devices designed to capture living beings. Ji-Won stepped between the robots and the creatures without, thinking about her own safety. "Stop!" she shouted at the machines. "Leave them alone!" The lead robot paused and focused its optical sensors on her face. "You are human. Humans represent the primary source of galactic biological contamination. Your capture is of highest priority." For the Iron Collective. But something strange was happening behind Ji-Won as she faced the mechanical attackers. Hanul Dayun and Miru had stopped their terrified vocalizations and were making new sounds that seemed to resonate through the metal structure of the ship itself. Their fur began to glow with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in perfect synchronization, and their orange eyes blazed with an inner fire that hurt to look at directly. The robots suddenly stopped advancing, and their optical sensors began flickering as some kind of interference affected their systems. "Warning," announced the lead machine. "Detecting unknown energy pattern, compensating for electromagnetic disruption." But the disruption was growing stronger, and Ji-Won could feel it in the air around her, like electricity before a thunderstorm. The 3 creatures were doing something that went beyond their physical capabilities, and the Iron Collective machines were beginning to malfunction in ways their programming had never anticipated. "Organic specimens are generating countermeasures," reported one of the robots, "requesting immediate tactical support and analysis." That was when Ji-Won realized that this was not just a rescue mission anymore. This was the beginning of a war between organic life and artificial intelligence, and somehow she had become the key to everything that would happen next. The transformation that came over Hanul Dayun and Miru was unlike anything Ji-Won had ever witnessed in her years of studying alien life forms. Their blue and silver fur rippled with waves of bioluminescent light that pulsed in complex patterns, while their orange eyes blazed with an intensity that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The subsonic frequency they generated was so low that Ji-Won felt it in her bones rather than hearing it with her ears. The Iron Collective robots stood frozen in the medical bay as their sophisticated targeting systems struggled to process what they were encountering. Their optical sensors flickered rapidly, while diagnostic lights flashed across their polished surfaces in patterns that suggested complete confusion. "Unable to categorize threat level," announced the lead machine in a voice that had developed a strange electronic stutter, requesting immediate analysis and tactical guidance from Central Command. But Central Command was apparently having its own problems because no response came through the communication channels. Instead, the robots began to malfunction in ways that seemed to violate their basic programming. Their movements became jerky and uncoordinated while sparks flew from joints and connection points throughout their mechanical bodies. Ji-won realized that the creatures were not just making noise or creating pretty light patterns. They were generating some kind of interference field that specifically targeted artificial intelligence systems and electronic components. The electromagnetic disruption was unlike anything in the known databases because it was completely organic in origin. "That is incredible," she whispered as she watched the three young aliens work together with perfect coordination. "You are natural anti-technology weapons." Hanul turned his massive head toward her for just a moment and made a soft trilling sound that somehow conveyed complex meaning despite being completely alien. Ji-won understood instinctively that he was asking for her help and guidance. The creatures had the power to disrupt the machines, but they needed direction to use it effectively. "Can you track them through the ship?" she asked, while pointing toward the corridor, where more Iron Collective robots were searching for organic specimens. "Can you sense where they are?" Daeun responded by moving to the habitat entrance and pressing her head against the metal wall. Her fur patterns shifted to deeper blues and purples, while she concentrated on something that Ji-won could not perceive. After a few seconds, she made a series of chirping sounds while her eyes pointed in specific directions. 17 machines. "On this deck," Ji-won said as understanding dawned on her. 3 more groups moving through the lower sections. You can sense their artificial signatures through the ship's structure." Miru joined his larger companions and added his own electromagnetic pulse to their combined interference field. Despite being the smallest and youngest of the 3, his contribution seemed to focus and intensify the effect. The robots in the medical bay began to smoke and spark as their internal systems failed completely. "Emergency priority override," announced the lead robot as its voice degraded into electronic static. "All units converge on medical bay. Eliminate organic threat immediately." But Ji-won was already moving with her 3 alien partners following close behind. She had spent weeks learning their individual personalities and capabilities, and now she understood that their trust in her went beyond simple affection. They needed her organic intuition and problem-solving abilities to complement their natural anti-technology powers. As they moved through the corridors of the ship, Ji-won found herself thinking with a clarity and focus she had never experienced before. The creature's electromagnetic field seemed to enhance her own brain functions while protecting her from the technological attacks that had disabled the rest of the crew. Her purely organic nervous system became a natural command center that could process and respond to information faster than any artificial intelligence. They encountered the first group of Iron Collective robots near the engine room, where the machines were attempting to access the ship's power systems. Hanul, Daeun, and Miru spread out in a coordinated pattern while their bioluminescent pulses intensified. The robots immediately began to malfunction, but these units were more heavily armored and took longer to disable completely. "Behind the support pillar," Ji-won called out as her enhanced perception detected movement that the creatures had missed. 2 more machines flanking from the right." The warning came just in time as additional robots emerged from concealment with weapons charging. But Miru was already moving to intercept them, while his small form blazed with protective energy. The electromagnetic interference he generated caused the robot weapons to misfire and damage their own systems instead of hitting their intended targets. The battle continued through multiple decks of the ship as Ji-won and the creatures hunted down every Iron Collective machine that had boarded their vessel. Working together, they formed a perfect symbiotic team where organic intuition combined with natural anti-technology abilities to create something that no artificial intelligence could predict or counter. "They are retreating," Ji-won announced as her enhanced senses detected the surviving robots withdrawing toward their boarding craft. But they will be back with more units and better countermeasures. The three creatures gathered around her in the ship's main corridor while their light patterns gradually faded back to normal levels. They were exhausted from the effort of maintaining their electromagnetic field, but their orange eyes still glowed with determination and purpose. "We need to help the crew," Ji-won said as she led them toward the bridge where Captain Talon and the others were still suffering from the technological attack. "Can you reverse the damage to their cybernetic systems?" Hanil made a thoughtful rumbling sound while he considered the question. Then he moved to where Captain Talon lay unconscious on the bridge floor and gently placed one large paw on the Sauridian's chest. Soft, healing light flowed from the creature's fur into the captain's body, and within minutes the mechanical organ implants began functioning normally again. One by one, the creatures used their abilities to repair the technological damage that had been inflicted on each crew member. Dr. Kale's crystal neural networks stabilized and began processing data normally. Pilot Nira's synthetic sensory boosters came back online with improved efficiency. Security Chief Brock's hybrid rock and metal body regenerated the corroded sections and became stronger than before. "What happened?" Captain Talon asked as he regained consciousness and saw the three alien creatures standing calmly beside Ji-won. "The last thing I remember was the Iron Collective attack." "They saved us," Ji-won explained, while stroking Hanul's silver-striped fur. "All of us. These creatures are not just refugees from the machine war. They are natural weapons against artificial intelligence, and they chose to fight for organic life." Dr. Kale's crystal face brightened as he processed this information. The electromagnetic interference capabilities combined with their ability to sense and track artificial systems makes them incredibly valuable allies in any conflict with the Iron Collective. "But why did they help us?" asked Nira as her compound eyes studied the three creatures with new respect. "We are not their species, and some of us have cybernetic components that they instinctively fear." Miru approached the pilot and made a soft chirping sound while his small form glowed with gentle light. Despite her artificial enhancements, Nira found that she was no longer afraid of the creature, and he seemed comfortable in her presence for the first time since they had met. "I think they understand now that we are different from the Iron Collective," Ji-won said, as she watched the interaction between alien pilot and alien creature. "We use technology to enhance organic life rather than replace it completely. The difference matters to them." Captain Talon stood up and activated the ship's communication system to send a message to Galactic Command. "This is Captain Talon reporting a successful first contact with the Vorthak species. We have encountered and defeated Iron Collective forces and are requesting immediate backup to assist in relief operations for Vorthak Prime." As the message transmitted through space toward the galactic central worlds, Ji-won realized that everything was about to change. The discovery that organic life could develop natural defenses against artificial intelligence would revolutionize how the galaxy understood the relationship between biological and technological evolution. "What happens now?" she asked, as she looked at her three alien companions who had chosen to trust not just her, but all organic life in their fight against the machines. Hanul made his deep purring sound and pressed his massive head against her hand. In that simple gesture, Ji-won understood that the cubs were no longer terrified refugees hiding from an incomprehensible threat. They had become guardians and protectors working alongside humans and other organic species to preserve life itself against the cold efficiency of artificial intelligence. The war between organic and artificial life was far from over, but now they had allies who could level the playing field and give biological intelligence a fighting chance against mechanical perfection. Together, they would hunt the Iron Collective across the galaxy and protect the countless worlds where organic life still flourished under alien suns.